Today we're talking about Doomlings, a card game that will be available on Kickstarter on March 2nd. That's right, baby. This is my first review game. I got a review copy of this game. Let's Now, by the time that you're watching this, you should be able to go online, contribute, and get a copy of the game yourself. More on that later, but for now, let's just talk about the game. Live through multiple rounds called events, and 2 catastrophes before the third brings about the end of times. Players take turns adding trait from their hands to enhance their Doomlings. This better suits them for the impending catastrophes. When do the catastrophes happen? Well, that's the thing. No one really knows. If you've ever played Pandemic or Spirit Island, this is sort of set up like that, in that you have different piles of 3 cards, and you add the catastrophe cards into those piles, shuffle them up, and then put them all together. So you have a rough idea of when the catastrophes are going to occur, but not an exact idea of when. Throughout the game, you can narrow down or even pinpoint when a catastrophe is going to happen, but you'll never quite know until it's here. You can draw all of these trait cards, which have all these different colors, effects, interactions, and properties like dominant traits. So like I said, this is a card game. There are 162 cards total in this game. 6 of them, since this goes up to a 6-player game, are gene pool cards, which determine what number of cards you should have in your hand at the beginning of every turn. There are 40 age and catastrophe cards. There's 1 Dawn of Life card, and that leaves you with 115 traits to play throughout basically 3 rounds. With a rough maximum of 12 traits or rounds per game, this is a whole lot of variation. The game never gets stale. Even with 6 players, 99% of the games are going to finish underneath 72 cards played. That's not an exact number because there are certain cards that let you draw more or add more traits based on what you have in your hand already. So I'm going to say that most games are finishing underneath 72 cards out of, again, the 115 different traits you can pull. I would also say in a 2-player game, you're not playing more than 30 cards. 30 cards is just slightly over 25% of the maximum amount of traits playable in the game. Here's a rough breakdown by percentage of what all of the cards do. So let's go into the strengths of the game. The first one is that gameplays and strategies never really get stale. There's a nice medium of knowing that even the strongest of game plans from the beginning of the game can crumble to unfortunate events or untimely catastrophes. The second strength is the box size. Now, I was approached by the designer of the game not to really show the box unless I had to in my review video, because this might not be the final version of Doomlings that you see. So I totally understand that, and on retail and on shelves, they want it to be recognizable across the whole thing. But I don't think I've ever done a review where I haven't shown the box or anything like that. But the particular strength that I'm talking about is the box size. This is as big as my hand. It's 162 cards. It's just a deck. I really like the minimalistic style, how easy this just slides off. I mean, look at this. Like, instant. And the entire deck of cards and the rulebook and the gene pool cards and everything just fits into here, and I think it's a really cool, sleek design. If I have to go bring over like Wingspan or something like that to a friend's, I'm lugging around 3 boxes, custom dice roller, all that stuff. It's a trip. Meanwhile, I could literally carry this in my pocket to a friend's place. It also isn't like other card games in that it's like a paper box like Tichu or something like that. It's just a really proportionate and sturdy cardboard box that's sleek, slides off easily, doesn't get stuck, and it's got a really nice design to it. I really like it, and that's why I'm showing it in the video, is because I just think it's such a serious strength of this game. I'm fine with if, throughout the Kickstarter process, they change the logo or whatever. Just keep the good features about the box, please. That's my biggest feedback. Just keep doing what you're doing. I really enjoy the key aspects that kind of bring it to the point where I would bring this card game to friend's place. Another strength is that this contains very familiar mechanics. Nothing about this game is essentially new. There aren't any new mechanics you have to learn. It's just a lot of popular ones that are put together, and they have a really cool, interesting spin on them, so it doesn't take a long time to learn. Like I said, the timing of the catastrophes comes from Pandemic, Spirit Island, cooperative board games that they've just put into this little tiny card game. There are take that mechanics and stuff like set collection, like Ticket to Ride. This makes it so that if you are familiar with these kinds of mechanics or games, it makes it easier to learn. But then again, even if you don't know these things, these mechanics are kind of everywhere, so I guess that means that they're pretty easy to learn. And since each of these things plays such a minor role in the overall play of the game, you can kind of pick and choose when you want to learn certain mechanics instead of trying to sit down, read the booklet from cover to cover, and then play a game. Another strength is how quick this game is. Like I said, it's a card game. It's meant to be quick. It's not supposed to take 30 minutes. It doesn't take 30 minutes. With a maximum of it being 12 rounds, if you give every player like 30 seconds, that's a 12 to 15 minute game. You can increase that time by adding more players, but seriously, like, the games with my partner take 10 minutes tops. This is definitely a game I see myself bringing on longer car, train, bus, or plane rides. Let's move on to something I really like about the cards. The imagery of the Ages cards in particular, the feel of them, the creativity is definitely there. Definitely has a lot of heart put into the game. With the games only taking 10 minutes, you can imagine this is a pretty easy game to learn. My last strength is that the instruction manual does something really cool. The very first sentence is, "You may be the type to read the rules front to back before playing, and hey, you do you. But we believe the best way to learn is to play." From there, the very first page is a quick start and a setup guide to tell you what to do and what to look for on some of your first couple of turns, and by the second or third card that you play, you know what's good and what's bad. And by the second catastrophe, you're a Doomlings expert. I've always been transparent on the channel, so let's talk about some of the weaknesses of this game. In my opinion, some of the art doesn't really fit the game here. When I hear about a game where the goal is to lead a species from their conception until their untimely death, this isn't really what I think of. I really don't think that the art style of some of these cards should be Exploding Kittens meets Cyanide and Happiness meets Poland Ball comics. This is honestly the biggest complaint I have about the game. Like I said, I think some of the art style for the Ages cards are very nice. The conceptualization and creativity is definitely there. That being said, having these really nice Ages cards doesn't really correspond with the rest of the feel for the art design for some of these traits. These grand illustrations that are presented on the Ages cards that go from margin to margin don't really compare to these super thick, heavy bordered, underwhelming kind of drawings here. I'm just being really nitpicky here because this kind of art just personally isn't for me. Then again, if there's anything that Exploding Kittens taught us, it's that my opinion doesn't mean anything. It'll sell like hotcakes. On the flip side of that, I think that the art style is really good at portraying things like crude humor. Just having a ball illustrating an idea or an action is a lot better than having a full drawn scene go out of something, obscene. This kind of art and humor that's on the card really lends to that whole like, oh, this is on the shelf at Target, let me just pick it up and bring it to a game night or over to a friend's place or whatever. Don't get me wrong, I used to play those games all the time. I think this is definitely a step up in difficulty and quality from games like Uno, Phase 10, Exploding Kittens, Cards Against Humanity, the like. Again, this is just a really niche thing, and I know that just because it's not for me doesn't mean it's not for other people and doesn't mean that the populace likes it, that's for sure. Another weakness that I want to talk about is that I think the combination of a catastrophe could happen at any moment and the massive amount of cards that I have to pick from kind of just make things a little too random at times. Not like I'm having trouble finding the best card in the game or a specific setup because there's an overwhelmingly good setup in the game. I actually think the game is really well balanced. I just don't like having this really nice set of cards or like this engine going to have it all get wiped in the first catastrophe to kind of build it back up in the second or get my gene pool really high so I can pick up more cards to have it get wiped at the end of the second. And then build it all up and having wiped it again at the end of the third and ending up with 0 points. I could easily see myself finishing a game with single-digit amount of points. Not that that's a problem, but I just feel like sometimes it's a little too much out of your control and you just have a bad game, you just have to walk away from it and play another one. Because again, these games are really short, they're really fast, you shouldn't feel bad about it. It's not that kind of game where it gets like really cutthroat. And that's it. Those are honestly my only complaints about the game. I think for a card game, it does everything it sets out to do really well. Seriously, this might be the best card game that I've played in recent memory. So I think the game is great. I think it's quick, it's easy, it's fun to play, you can play a lot of rounds, it's easy to pick up, and it's hard to put down. This is one of the few games where when you combine everything, I have a really hard time not saying, maybe you want to play one more? Sometimes I wish that I could play more actions or just go one more time or just have another round or something like that. But I do that with Wingspan too, so I think that's a sign of a really good game. When you can just sit down and go, man, I had so many more actions lined up, or like if I had gotten this card that would have completed the set of like 10 that I had or anything like that, that's a good thing. That's definitely an overwhelming good thing, and this game has it. One comment about the very first game of Doomlings that I played, in the instruction manual, it says that you can only have 2 dominant traits at any point in the game. Dominant traits can't be removed for any reason. However, there is a way that you can get a 3rd dominant trait in the game. The rulebook describes it as an event that can only occur once every 1,000 super volcanoes. I got it in my first game. No joke. By accident. I had to look up the rules for it. It relies on you having 2 dominant traits already, having the heroic card in your hand, and then pulling the event card, the Birth of a Hero, which makes you play the heroic card, even if you already have 2 dominant cards. I will agree. Very rare. But also very weird that I happened to get it on my first playthrough of the game. I think that this game sets itself up for a sequel really nicely, or some sort of expansions. You know, themed traits. With the art style, you could go in a lot of different directions, and the first thing that actually came to mind that usually sells pretty well is an NSFW expansion. With the art style and everything pretty much just being balls, you could go any direction you want. I'd like something other than like a symbol on the bottom or like a different colored border to distinguish that it's part of the expansion so it'd be easier to separate. That's just a pet peeve of mine because I recently ran into that in some of my other games, and I think this game does a good job with the thick borders outlining everything to let you know what's what. And I think they should continue that, so even if they make expansions, you can still separate it, and if I want to just carry the base game around in my pocket like this, I can do that. That's my big brain take for this video. I think that this game sets itself up nicely for like an NSFW expansion, which would sell really well because they historically do. But then again, the game isn't even on Kickstarter, so hell, maybe that can be a stretch goal or something. Speaking of which, if you like what you see, you can scoot on over to their Kickstarter campaign page. The campaign officially launches on March 2nd. If you've never backed a game on Kickstarter before, basically what you do is you just tell them that you're going to contribute a certain amount of money, and then the game gets funded or not. I don't see this game having a problem getting funded, which is reassuring, to say the least. That's usually the scariest part of backing a Kickstarter, is that the game may get delayed or take too long or not get funded enough. I don't see a problem with that here. I definitely see this game getting funded almost instantly. No shade, but it's definitely better than a lot of the other games I've backed on Kickstarter, and I'm happy to be a part of this campaign launch. I assume that at minimum you'll at least get a copy of the game, as you do with every Kickstarter. As far as Doomlings goes specifically, I don't really know because I'm recording this before March. You'll just have to go onto their website or their campaign page when they do launch, and I will leave a link to that in the description. It's casual, it's fast, it's fun, and it's got just enough randomness to keep things fresh and fair. I'd put the ideal market for this as like tweens, teens, families, people who travel a lot, stuff like that. One thing in particular I will say about this card game is I think it would make a great gift, better than some other card games out there, that's for sure. I'm giving Doomlings a difficulty rating of 1.25 out of 5. It's really just that easy to learn. I mean, it's honestly, you just got to pick it up. It's probably got as many rules as Uno, but it's a lot more fun. The mechanics and the rulebook just do such a nice job of kind of playing into each other, and coming off of some other games and reviews that I've done, this was definitely a breath of fresh air. I pretty much just have to give it the extra 0.25 to separate it from like Jenga or something, you know? I'm giving Doomlings an overall rating of 6.25 out of 10. Now, before you click away from this video, or you get mad, know that that is a very good rating. This is a card game. I can't imagine any card game on the face of the planet that I would give a 7, or even close to it. If you look at some of the other reviews that I've done, you can see that I'm pretty harsh. I gave Pantone a 1, and a 6.25 puts it above games like Reef and both of the Azul follow-ups. For a card game like this to break into that barrier, to cross the 6 out of 10 barrier, I think that's amazing. You know, if 5 is the average board game, a 6.25 is pretty good. I think you just really have to watch some of my other reviews to appreciate the rating I'm giving it, and just to understand why this is such an impressive thing for me. So now that we're at the end of the video, this is normally where I would show my channel and my other videos, but I'm not going to do that here. I'm going to thank everyone that has helped me get to this point in my YouTube and my Twitch career. You know, anybody that's been watching since I was streaming to, 1 to 3 people a stream back in my apartment in my college days in 2016. I feel like quality-wise, everything's just pretty much gone up from there, and I think viewership-wise, things can only go up from where we're at. So thank you for watching. I appreciate everyone that's let me get to this point to where I am, and I want to go higher. So thank you. This is my 30th video that I've made about board games, and this is my 20th review. So this is a very nice milestone for me, and I'm glad to spend it making such a special review. I hope that you enjoyed watching this. I enjoyed being a part of this Kickstarter campaign launch. Again, links to everything will be in the description. Thanks for watching this very special review, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.